I'm Denny Taylor. We're here in New York City for the Garn Press Author Celebration. I'm sitting with Ruth Finnegan and we're going to talk about Black Inked Pearl. First though, Ruth, yesterday you received an email that you have 4 new awards. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, I'm so amazed, and they're not the first one either. They're all the recent ones. Earlier ones are from Indie Excellent. The recent ones are from Reader's Favourite, which is one of the really highly ranked reader awards. Because the Business BBB are very fussy about award, and rightly so. And one was a finalist for Black Inked Pearl. My novel, which Wonderful Garn Press have published. But the others, and this amazed me, are all of my non-fiction books. I'm an anthropologist. Well, I did classics first of all, Greek and Latin literature, so wonderful. And then that led me into sort of literary side of anthropology, which when I began that in the 1960s wasn't quite so common, but I studied African oral storytelling. And so I've written a lot about that kind of thing. And the 3 non-fiction academic books that got it, one was called Communicating, and it's about all the multisensory side of communicating, which is not just verbal in the narrow sense or cognitive, but multisensory, that communicating book. One was a book called Why Do We Quote, which I think is actually my favourite book of my 20 or 30 academic books. And it's a kind of complement of my novel, Black Inked Pearl, because Why Do We Quote is about the theory and the practice of quoting. Nobody's really written about that. They've written about quotations and collections, millions of them. It goes right back to the Sumerians. Do you know the first extensive written literature was a collection of quotations in Sumer on these wedge kind of pottery things. But that's about quotation and allusion, which is equally important. Black Inked Pearl is actually doing quoting and alluding. So I'm really thrilled to have those, and also to have a medal from the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. Doesn't that sound good? For my work in anthropology for the last 5 years.
It's wonderful. One of the things that you've written, and I'm choosing to share one of your own quotes with you, because I think it ties in with the awards and your absolute devotion to not only the study of language but also to your novel. And this is the quote, this is you. You wrote, "Music, sound, sense, imagery, sonic and poetic associations, emotional intensity, a sense of universality behind often quite ordinary words, with a quality that can also flow out into prose as well as inward into human hearts." I think that is an extraordinary quote about your use of language and the way in which you think about language, and I wondered if you would say something about that.
When you say that, I think, where did that quote come from? That is so well put. Well, 2 things, I suppose. One is it ties in with what I was saying just now about multisensory quoting. We want to think about sound and sight and movement, facial expression, and even olfaction, and of course touch, the tactile. That's all part of communication. And the audience, of course, as I found very much in that wonderful set of readings on Friday that Garn pressed, which was so moving. We really, as human beings, we have 5 senses, 6 senses, I like to think as well. But then the other thing, how did Black Inked Pearl, that book, come to me? with this wonderful cover. I want to show the cover because look at the butterfly. I didn't know you were going to do a butterfly. Maybe you didn't at first, and I had forgotten until a great friend, my first real proper pupil, who did classics with me after me. Butterfly in Greek is the same as the word for the soul. Psyche, like psychology, psychiatry. And so in my novel, the butterfly, the soul, flies on, well, butterfly is also the spiritus, the breath, flies on her journey through the black ink of the print. And at the end, she settles down with her wings folded. And it's in a way the story of Christ, of religion, of humankind. And I could not have discovered that. I didn't invent it. It was discovered, it was revealed to me. I really truly think this, though it may sound so strange to you, as a soul, not as an academic reader of written words, because it all came to me in dreams. Well, I say dreams. In the Middle Ages they might have said, or in Africa they might have said visions. And in a way, though I say dreams, that's a bit misleading, because it was really the interval or the liminal, the sacred magic space between waking and sleeping. And though in European culture and in my culture, when we say dream, we immediately think of something visual, and I've always thought of that. Actually, it was more an intense node of emotion. And then the words afterwards grew somehow through the inside of my mind, as if from the globe of heaven, as if stars falling down, or words that partly I selected, partly selected themselves and fell down like falling stars. And then the next day I wrote it down just as if it was from dictation, or as if I was transcribing from one of those tapes of oral storytelling in Africa. So it's very much all the senses, but beyond just our human senses. And that's why I feel I've been given a kind of mission to disseminate it. It's not just kind of marketing. I just want you all to read it, because it's a message from, if you like to use the word heaven, not everyone likes that term, that metaphorical term, a message for us all.
One of the things that I'm always conscious of is when you talk about either your academic work or about Black Inked Pearl, is that you talk about your childhood and your mother and father and your early school experience. Would you like to share some of that with us?
Well, I had wonderful parents. My mother was, I'm sure she still is up there, a great storyteller. She would snatch on anybody and tell them a tall story, which of course would be hugely exaggerated and in one sense not quite right, and yet in essence absolutely true. And I learned from her about the excitement of story and about not making my prose pompous. She read my first dissertation and she said, "Ruth, that's very academic." And that was one of the best bits of advice I've got. The other was, well, in a way she was saying the same thing. Listen to it. Listen to how your audience will hear it. Have the silences. And my father, well, he had the Ulster wit. Gentle, quiet, wry. And he used to, can I tell you a limerick he used to tell us as children? Hope I can remember it. I sat next the Duchess at tea. It was as I supposed it would be. Her rumblings abdominal were something phenomenal, and everyone thought it was me. I think it's just lovely. But also I learned so much from their commitment. I grew up in Northern Ireland as they did, and the divide, the bloody divide, literally, between Catholics and Protestants was terrible. They did so much to transcend that, and between classes, and to get, the dockers in Derry where we were, they had no protective clothing in the 30s. They lost their hands. And my parents, though not great trade union people, did help them to they didn't do it for them, helped them to organise a trade union, so they then had protective clothing and some protection against just dismissal like that. For that they were actually thrown out of Northern Ireland later, and also for my father's pacifism. He was a real idealist, and he wrote a wonderful booklet in 1937, War at Any Cost, to try to prevent the next war. And they were great lovers of Germans, of German culture, so of course they were called Nazis, even though they spent so much of their time getting Jews out of Austria and getting them jobs. So I grew up loving Jewish culture because I met some of these. So they influenced me deeply in their commitment to liberal democratic values and to love, really.
And they sent you to a Quaker school?
Yes, and of course that was why they did, because they wanted me to go to a school that would transcend this divide, and the Quaker School did. And they taught me not only their idealism, but to learn texts before breakfast and repeat them aloud to the headmistress before we were allowed breakfast. And that had a deep effect on me.
Ruth, thank you.